Chapter 5 focuses on the topic of photosynthesis. But before we get into the process of photosynthesis, what actually Chapter 5 begins with is it begins with mentioning a couple of events that have happened over the past several years in America. For example, it mentions Hurricane Katrina and the flooding that happened because of it in New Orleans. It mentions Hurricane Sandy and the flooding that happened in New York City because of that. And so what we're noticing over the past several years is an increase in what your book calls these catastrophic flooding events. And so the question is, why all of a sudden are we starting to see an increase in flooding? And so it leads that into the discussion on global climate change, that we believe that these increased events of flooding is because of local changes in average temperature, in average precipitation, and in average sea level. And we're not just seeing this in America, we're seeing this all over the Earth's surface. And so why are we seeing an increase in climate change? Well, we believe it's because of global warming. Now, I know that when you hear those terms, typically a lot of people don't necessarily see that it's something that's actually been proven, but by definition, global warming is a progressive increase in the Earth's average temperature, and this is leading to those climate changes that we're seeing all over the Earth. Now, why are we seeing this? Well, most scientists believe that it's because of an increase in human activities that are releasing what we call the greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So greenhouse gases include things like water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and ozone, carbon dioxide being the more prominent one. And so as we're increasing these gases into the atmosphere, we're seeing that affect the temperature on Earth. Now, why is this? Well, these gases cause what we call the greenhouse effect, which basically mean these gases accumulate in the atmosphere and they trap energy from the sun. See, as sunlight enters the Earth's surface, it warms it, and then that heat is going to be released back into the atmosphere, but these greenhouse gases trap it and re-radiate it back to the Earth's surface. It kind of acts like a blanket, if you will. You know, when you put a blanket on, what the blanket actually does in warming you up is it takes your own body temperature and it keeps it underneath the blanket. And so as it takes that heat energy that's going to be released from your body, it re-radiates it back to your body, and so that keeps you warm. Now, by itself, the greenhouse effect is not dangerous because we need to keep the Earth's surface at a certain temperature so that it's warm enough to support life. So the greenhouse effect by itself, again, it's not dangerous. Just like putting a blanket over your body is not a dangerous thing. Now, I do want to remind you of something that we learned about in Unit 1, the fact that water can absorb heat energy. Remember, we mentioned that hydrogen bonds that hold water together, they're able to absorb and then to release heat energy. And so because of this property of water, it prevents large changes in temperature. So it helps to maintain a pretty constant temperature because we know that a majority of Earth is water. And so as water maintains this stable temperature, it helps the Earth to maintain stable temperature. So there has to be this balance between the amount of heat energy that's released and the amount of heat energy that's stored in order to keep climate conditions stable on Earth. But what we're seeing is because of an increase in carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, this balance is being disrupted and it's causing more heat to be sent back to Earth, which is increasing Earth's temperature. And as you read, it's causing a melting of the ice caps, and so we're starting to see water levels rise, which is leading to, again, the catastrophic flooding. So one of the gases that I said is most prominent right now is carbon dioxide. So we want to remind you of something that you learned about in probably elementary school called the carbon cycle. And so what this reminds us is that carbon is constantly flowing between living organisms. That carbon then is released into the atmosphere, which is then flowing into bodies of water and rock. And so you have this constant cycle of carbon being passed through all these different parts of Earth. Now, this in and of itself is not causing too much carbon into the atmosphere. The problem are the fossil fuels. Now, I know you've heard of these terms before, but fossil fuels are basically concentrated energy forms that have been trapped in the ground in buried organisms. And so what's happening is, as we're burning these fossil fuels through petroleum, through coal, through natural gas, we're doing this in order to power homes, to power cars, to power businesses, but this is releasing excess carbon into the atmosphere that's not being being cycled back through that carbon cycle. And so because of all this increased burning of fossil fuels and increase in carbon, it's causing an increase in the temperature of Earth because it's trapping more heat than is necessary. And so when you look at this chart over the past 50 years, you'll see because of all the increase in fossil fuel usage, we see an increase in carbon dioxide that's found in the atmosphere. So the question is, can we fix this problem? Can we fix the amount of carbon dioxide that's being released so that we can keep the temperature of Earth stable? Well, what this chapter poses, it proposes the question that, well, we know a little bit about photosynthesis, and so can photosynthesis actually slow climate change? Well, in order to understand that question, in Part B, we're going to look at the process of photosynthesis and see if it actually could slow down this change.